This year, springtime is bringing no let-up in the financial hemorrhaging at Lakes District Health Board. Despite the report indicating that the organisation has been underfunded by millions of dollars, not an extra cent has yet been received from the Health Ministry.
Certainly as a brand new Chief Executive, my first CE post, I did find it extremely challenging.
An important part of the just completed joint study was the agreement that all parties would accept the study's findings, which included the recommendation of an immediate injection of funding to the tune of $4.5 million. As Rotorua Hospital is desperately arranging a cash advance from its bankers to pay staff and creditors, another branch of government, the Audit Office, is getting worried. They're wanting written assurance that funding for the next year will actually happen. What follows is a flurry of meetings, phone calls and emails that consumes the hospital administration for several weeks, until finally on September 10, the District Health Board, now teetering on the brink of insolvency, finally receives its cash injection. There is no such reprieve for the hapless Bay of Plenty steamers who have just received a drubbing at the hands of the Canterbury Crusaders, 72-3, producing the biggest provincial loss in the region's rugby history. The following weekend, playing at home, it's not much better. Watched by a meagre crowd of around 3,000, Taranaki hand out a 49-17 defeat. Within the Bay Union, there are stronger mutters about Rotorua's poor spectator numbers, and the first suggestions emerge that games held at a newly built venue, Tauranga's Bay Park, would draw much better numbers from a much larger and growing population base.
Well, we weren't happy, but we had to take what was dished out to us. That was it.
There has been disappointment also for Malcolm Short. Despite the apparent success of Central Mall, his dreams of a money-making machine for Te Arawa have been shattered by last month's legislation that precludes any new casinos being built anywhere in the country. The grim irony doesn't escape him or many others in the community. In a way, Rotorua does indeed have a casino already, just fragmented into small establishments dotted around the business district and now threatening to move into the suburbs. It may be just a coincidence, this being an election year, but the District Council now starts to take a serious look at whether local bylaws can be invoked to control the growth of casino bars and their pokies. The Rotorua dawn of September 12 has nothing to distinguish it from any other, until television sets and radios are switched on. It is a horror which has begun at around 2 a.m. local time. Half a world away in New York, that was 8 o'clock yesterday, the morning of September 11. While Rotorua and the rest of the country wrestle with the enormity of events unfolding far away, there are some who feel the catastrophe even more closely. Awake since early morning, Nongataha residents Don and Heather Newport are watching the television reports with the knowledge that a family member is in Washington, where an attack has also struck the Pentagon.
It was a bit nerve-wracking to know that they were so close to a damn plane that nearly wiped everyone out. You know, it was the part that was really had me thinking there for a while, but then I suddenly thought, well, I know she's level-headed, she's good, and she can handle herself. And
it was just heightened tension. I think it was, yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible, really. And all you were thinking, oh, I hope they're all right, I hope they're all right. Because there was 3 girls there, but they had travelled widely, and I knew they wouldn't hopefully do anything silly, but it was not knowing that was the problem. That was really the thing that worried me.
Also in the United States, but far from the scene of the Twin Towers disaster, Dave Donaldson has just arrived in the state of Colorado, where the World Mountain Bike Championships are being held in the resort town of Vail. He witnesses a nation struck by crisis.
It was snowing outside. I turned on the TV and it was happening live. And I woke up Shreve and said, "Get out of bed, come and look at this." And so the United States was changed. They nearly called off the World Champs, but so many of the athletes were sort of there already. A lot of their volunteers took off from Vail back home, and I had people from home, including my boss at the police station, saying, "What's going on? Are you guys all right?" I said, "Yeah, we're sitting up in the Rockies, you know, we're fine." But I mean, the sky was clear blue, normally filled with vapour trails in the United States. They all just vanished. They shut down all commercial airlines. We could have easily been on one of those planes. You know, we'd just taken I think it was a United Airlines flight from Toronto down to Denver, and we just felt for all those people, you know. And gosh, the American people, they really pulled together, but they were angry. They were burning deep down, you know.
In the newspaper world, the Daily Post is unusual, routinely going on sale mid-morning. So its print run begins each day around 5 a.m. Today it's able to carry a starkly graphic full front page of the disaster and scoops every other paper in the country. In the hours and then days after the terrorist attacks, contemplation begins of the possible consequences, even for faraway Rotorua.
We weren't going to miss it. Even though we were isolated away down here, it was going to have a huge effect. It was actually within days. It was only within a matter of a couple of days that it was very, very clear that air travel would never ever be the same.
During the remainder of September, Mayor Hall begins to see his ambitions for a Rotorua International Airport starting to turn to custard. And it isn't just because of the unforeseen consequences of international terrorism. There are other external influences coming into play from much closer to home. The Rotorua District Council announces that initially the airport runway will be lengthened to the south by 200 metres in the first of a two-stage development, while the problem of the trees at the northern end is said to be progressing well towards a solution. But then comes a body blow from Environment Bay of Plenty, who are charged with responsibility for regional transport. Now the chairman of EBOP, John Keeney, makes a declaration that due to the high costs involved, the day of independent airports for the region is over. He's pushing for a new airport located in the Paengaroa area that will serve the whole region, and in this he gets some unlikely support.
Graham was very gung-ho that I must not support Paengaroa. That would be the undoing of this region, this district's plans for turning Rotorua into our regional airport. I just felt that once you decide that if this is the hub where you're going to put an airport, that would instantly change the whole roading plans for the Bay of Plenty for the better. And you knew Tauranga had nowhere to go. Whakatane was too far away, but Paengaroa, if you thought of the perfect site, that was it. When
they came out, I was really a bit disappointed, I can say, because it was obvious to me anyhow that it was not going to be a runner, and we're going to go down a track that would take a lot of time, a lot of energy, and we're going to lose sight of those objectives that we had quite clearly about for our airport.
But there is another EBOP announcement in September, one which cheers Ian McLean of the Lakes Water Quality Society. It's another positive spin-off from his successful Water Quality Symposium earlier in the year. Environment Bay of Plenty have agreed to make a $600,000 grant to fund a chair in lake management and restoration at the University of Waikato. establishing the basis for a coordinated approach to top-level study and research into what seems to be a daunting problem. In October, one of Rotorua's most important civic assets celebrates a birthday. Castle Corp is 10 years old. It's an anniversary that comes at a time when Rotorua is regularly winning plaudits for its visual appeal. Often overlooked is the recognition that it was a council decision back in 1991 to retain maintenance services in its own hands that should be applauded. At the time, it was a hard-fought battle.
Castle Corp started because a lot of local authorities earlier on, during John Keeney's term, they started taking a lot of the jobs and outsourcing them. And we looked at what had happened, we looked at our surveys, the satisfaction that we'd got from back from our ratepayers, and said, do we really want to go down that track?
There was a lot of time, a lot of discussion and really fiery debate about going out to contract.
We felt that we didn't want to give away some of the good things where our surveys had showed. So it was, Castle Corp was born really to play that role, arm's length, but council owned and operated operation, and I thought it was the best compromise.
Very close votes. There was, you know, you might have voted by the skin of your teeth to keep Castle Corp, but Castle Corp is a good operation and is admired by many other councils in the country.
Today's headquarters in Vaughan Road is a far cry from a council department which in the early years of the 20th century possessed only a few horses and drays. Today, Castle Corp is one of Rotorua's major employers. The staff represent a quarter of the District Council's workforce, eating up 20% of each annual expenditure. But the results of their endeavours are there for all to see. Early in October, central government have at last enacted legislation which will allow local bodies some measure of control over the inexorable growth of gaming outlets. And the District Council moves quickly to apply new rules to the local gaming industry. Other new laws mean that at Rotorua Airport, the anti-terrorism arrangements imposed after 9/11, security screening and separate arrival and departure areas are destined to become permanent features. This means that terminal facilities designed for the world of the 1960s will be even further stretched, providing air travellers with even more reason to complain about lack of space and rising inconvenience. But at this time, most interest is focused on the upcoming local body elections. Mayor Graham Hall has two challenges for the job, Councillors Cliff Lee and Knocker Dean. Of the wards, the West Ward has the highest number of candidates by far. 9 are standing for 3 positions on council. In the last days of the present council, one member is aloof from all the election hype. Long-serving West Ward councillor Roma Cook is retiring.
I've always felt that you should be on a board or whatever for a certain amount of time and then move off and let somebody else take his place. And that's what I've done all the time. I've thought I'd been long enough as a councillor.
Local body elections are concurrent with those held for the District Health Board and the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust. At this year's Trust AGM, a few voices had again been raised over council members also on the Trust board, particularly the Mayor and his Deputy Johnny Lepper, and the perceived conflict of interest that could produce. But nobody can argue either with the contribution of $20 million being made to the community, or the financial management which has seen the Trust's assets increase from $80 to $130 million. In fact, this year, the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust is named New Zealand's best for the second time in its short history. The mid-October elections bring a landslide win for the Mayor, delivering him a fourth successive term with a majority of 7,786. The year's debate over lakebed ownership seems to have done him no harm at all. Cliff Lee has been returned for the East Ward, and there are two new faces on council. Local radio man Chris Campbell has just beaten out Mike McVicker for the North Ward slot, while at his third attempt, Kevin Winters has ousted long-term councillor Anne Bowie for the South Ward. The Daily Post refers to the new council as being pretty much like the old. Among its early business will be to begin a search for a replacement for City Manager Ted Hanson. To some, Ted Hanson's resignation earlier in the year came as a surprise. Appointees usually stay in the job for years, like his town clerk predecessor Harry Childs. But at the start of the 21st century, there are new rules for local body administration that don't fit what some would describe as the Ted Hanson autocratic approach. In-year plans and consultation. I reckon I was there at the best of times. It was a time when we actually did things. It's towards the end of my time, you did feel like you were doing 90% of your job is talking to people about what you were going to do rather than actually doing. Getting things done, like winning games, has not applied to the Bay of Plenty Steamers in this year's NPC competition. In fact, for this final game of the season, they are playing old rivals and second division leaders Hawke's Bay. Relegation out of First Division awaits the Steamers if they lose this one. Tony Rogers for the Radio Network reports the game.
From the kick-off, Hawke's Bay moved quickly to establish forward superiority. Both backlines eager to move the ball out wide. But it's the Magpies with a territorial advantage and an early try for first points on the board. At first, there's plenty to keep the local supporters on tenterhooks. Now the middle of the first 40 and the Steamers search for a gap near the Magpies line. Nick Collins, try, 5 points all. Penalties go begging from the off-form boots of both teams' kickers. And then just before the break, Bay of Plenty strike again with Charles Baxter lightning fast out wide. In the second half, the local crowd have even more to cheer about. The Bay of Plenty defence proves seamless with the back line incisive on attack, producing 2 more tries and a penalty. The predictions of the pundits of a one-season wonder have been dispelled. The threat of relegation at last has been averted. Final scoreline, 32 points to 12. So ultimately, it was disappointment for Hawke's Bay, and those are feelings that the tantalised Bay of Plenty Steamers can understand after the walking of the razor edge of promotion relegation for the best part of the season. But for the Bay of Plenty, it's been a tempering process as well, with the forge of NPC First Division providing some vital lessons that will stand that team in good stead next year.
Labour weekend has come and gone. It was wet, to nobody's surprise, but as usual, Rotorua was packed out for the long weekend. One popular attraction would not be able to enjoy the holiday bonanza. Long a draw card for younger visitors, with its water slide, bumper boats and dodgems, Leisure World has drawn the scrutiny of the occupational safety and health authorities, who have considered its deteriorating flooring and wiring hazardous and closed the place down. A harsh but cautionary story for others who operate in thermal areas. There were those at the start of 2001 who were predicting a good year for local forestry. Such has not proved the case. It has been hard going. Despite the low New Zealand dollar, important markets in Asia have dried up, just at the time when more and more local forests are maturing for harvest. Even exports to Australia have been dropping. Despite a general perception of our closest neighbour as being a land of eucalyptus trees, in fact they have large areas of their own pine forests. These trees may look familiar, but this forest, typical of large areas of southern Queensland, is not growing Pinus radiata. This is southern jack pine, and the Aussies reckon it's heaps better in quality than our stuff. In Australia, it's becoming preferred as building timber for framing and structural components. During the year, CITIC, a partnership of forestry interests controlling large areas of central North Island forest, has gone into receivership and lies in limbo while accountants pick over a possibly still lucrative corpse. However, none of these forestry concerns would be apparent to the local observer used to the endless procession of logging trucks heading to the coast. What they might have noticed is an increase in graphic newspaper reports of spectacular logging truck accidents. And now log truck operators are calling for even larger loads. The answer appears to be to make the load safer by being longer but lower. And at the end of October, the system is being trialled in Rotorua for a month, using trucks with loads lowered by a third, towing trailer units with smaller wheels that lower the centre of gravity. October has also been the month when, after 97 years, Rotorua finally loses its scheduled passenger rail service. The Rotorua Review is on hand for the ceremony beside the last rail car to Auckland. And a front page story records the nostalgic farewell to a piece of local history. Also there to say goodbye was rail enthusiast John Smale.
Well, I was one of the guys that went on the last rail car, courtesy of the driver, and rode it up to Putaru. There was a big crowd there, and people were sad to see it go. If the service had been provided, people wouldn't have given it up. Basically, that's what it was. It was no cheaper than the bus, but on the other hand, it was very good. But they did suffer a number of breakdowns through badly maintained rolling stock.
And even as the final farewells are made, only a stone's throw away on the Kotu overbridge roll examples of the transport revolution that has brought Rotorua's rail service to an end.